Hey everybody, I'm Yvonne Williams with Back to Earth Creations, and in this video I'm going to show y'all how to make your very own spinning pendant. So let's go ahead and get started. For today's project, I'm going to start off with the tools and materials that we can be using. All of these will be listed down in the video description, as well as on the curated toolkit on our website. Links for all that are down below as well. Round nose pliers and mandrel pliers are super duper helpful. I consider the round nose pliers to be pretty mandatory in my wire wrapping kit, and while the mandrel pliers are nice, they can be replaced with knitting needles, pens, anything that you have on hand, but I do like the consistency and convenience of having mandrel pliers. Also, chain nose or flat nose pliers work really great. I actually prefer, if I had to choose just one, it would be my flat nose pliers that we've actually taken to a grinder and ground down a much finer tip on one side. That way you can get some really tight bends. But I'm also a huge fan of these stepped nose pliers, or tapered flat nose, I think they're called. I got these on riogrande.com, or Rio Grande, maybe, I don't know, I never pronounce anything right. But again, it's spelled correctly down in the video description, so that you can find some. I really like these because they provide the nice crisp 90-degree bends in my wire that I usually look for when I'm using my flat nose pliers, but with a much narrower tip, so it lets me get into much tighter spaces. As well as bent nose pliers. Again, it's great to be able to get into those tighter areas. And then some nice flush cutters. I prefer snips that are flat on one side. That way I can make sure that we're getting a nice flush cut. And I just use wire snips from like the electronics section or something, because they're typically just as sharp and durable, but a lot less expensive than the wire snips that are marketed to crafters. So now I typically don't cut anything thicker than 12 gauge wire with them though, and never like stainless steel or memory wire or anything, because that will mar up the tip, but we'll talk about that in a different in a different video. A marker for marking on your wire can be very, very helpful. And for the wire that I'm using in today's tutorial, for my thick wire, I'm using 16 gauge. All of my wire is from parawire.com. They have a fantastic selection of very high quality non-tarnish wire, so you can get some really nice base metal tones, but you don't have to worry about it turning your skin green. Like, I have had this spool for like 3 or 4 years at this point, sitting out on my pegboard where it's been exposed to all the humidity and dust and everything of my house, with sun exposure on it as well, and it is held up fantastically and doesn't flake or anything even whenever I hammer it. So I highly recommend this stuff. Now this is the 16 gauge round. This design also looks amazing with square wire, or you could use an 18 gauge wire for the frame, but I feel like thicker is better on this one, because you're going to be having wire that's kind of just standing out on its own, and I'd hate for something to get, like, if I made it out of maybe a 20 gauge, which is thinner, the bigger the number, the thinner the gauge is, and this is American wire gauge. I'd hate to make a pendant out of 20 gauge and have it get smushed from carrying groceries in or something. Now you could use half round wire with this, as I did here in this example, which I think looks pretty neat, but I wouldn't recommend that if you're just starting out. If this is your first time wire wrapping or making this design, it is so much easier to use round wire, and I'll be using 26 gauge in the silver plated titanium color, which I think matches really well with a lot of oxidized or antiqued sterling silver, as well as stainless steel jewelry. It looks really nice. So to show you what we're making, I'm actually going to be wrapping this stone. Any stone that's drilled through will work. And I wanted to make a little fidget spinny pendant. So this one's a little bit wonky. It was my first prototype of the piece, but it's great for if you have a stone that's pretty from both sides and you want to be able to feature both of them, or if you like to kind of fiddle with your jewelry. I don't know, I thought it was a lot of fun. And then also, it's a great selection for, we make some of our own lampwork glass beads here, and they're just perfect for fidgeting with. And if you want to do something like this, in addition to the stone or glass piece that you use as your focal point, I do recommend some little metal beads. Here I have some 4mm enameled steel that, again, links are down in the video description. Glass seed beads would also work. I just wanted something that would make a nice buffer between the glass beads. That way they're not rubbing shoulders with each other. And it helps them to spin more freely, I think. So I'm going to wrap this one today. And we're going to start with our 16 gauge thick wire. Let me see if I can find the end. Just any end will work. Okay. Now also some pliers that I don't have on hand at the moment, but that would be very useful, would be some nylon jaw pliers, and that would allow us to really straighten out our wire and get all of those excuse me, kinks and bends and stuff out of it. Now here I have trimmed off, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 inches. Now the larger a stone that you have, the more wire you'll need for this. And I'm going to come through. Now also, I'm just doing a very, very basic frame. On this one, you could cut multiple lengths of wire and weave them together. It's really, we're just making a frame that we can suspend our bead in. So you could use tape and stuff if you're inclined to do that. But I'm just holding this down onto the table. And if you can see, made my little Sharpie marker marks. And I'm going to come through and use my flat nose pliers to hold my wire. Now keep in mind, whenever you're bending wire, let's see if we can zoom in on this. It's not going to bend directly at the edge of your pliers. It's going to bend a little bit outward. So I try to have my pliers inset just a hair from where I actually want my bend to end up being, and then I'm going to very sturdily hold my pliers and then bend that 90 degree. And now we can actually come in on the other side and flatten with our pliers again on both sides, because pressing with my thumb only makes it so flat. And I'm going to test fit just as much as possible to make sure that I'm doing a nice 90 degree bend. And I'm finding it is much better to err on the side of your frame being a little bit larger than what you need it to be than to make it too tight, because on this one here, the prototype that I had done, it's a little snug right here at the top shoulder, and that keeps catching my bead. Now I don't feel like it's, you know, the end of the world, but I would have liked to have been able to spin it and just have it go for days. So now I'm going to come in on the other side. We have our little Sharpie mark, which the Sharpie does kind of buff and rub off with your finger over time. And I'm going to position that. And I'm actually going to, don't hesitate to rotate your piece around to where it best suits your hand positioning. So I'm going to come in and press, getting that up to a 90 degree bend, and then I am going to come in here on the other side and squeeze just a bit. Sometimes it doesn't really accomplish anything, but I like to do it just in case it does. Now also, you could get all kinds of wonky and weird with your frame shape if you want to get make it much more scroll work or however you like. I just wanted to start with something very, very basic and simple. And if you were making a frame for a round piece, that's actually a lot easier, because you just take like a mandrel and shape your wire around that. And then, so this mandrel would have been a little bit small for this bead. You know, and we'll go ahead and make a circle as well. Sorry, words are hard. But, I wanted to show you guys on a slightly more difficult shape, because if you can do it on a rectangle, you've got this. You have got this. Okay, so now I'm gonna try to, on this piece here, I did not do a bead on either end, and I think I'd like to on this piece. So I'm going to adjust the camera That way I stay in frame, hopefully. Instead of having my bead pressed all the way up against the frame, I'm going to offset it by just a little bit, and I'm going to come in here and I'm going to mark where I want my bend to be. And we can check that against a ruler or something if you're into that, to make sure that it is even. And we want to make sure that these lines are parallel to each other, just as much as we can manage. And so now I'm going to come in here and grip like so. And I actually think I'd prefer to grip on this part of the wire because I really don't want to distort this part, whereas this part here we're going to be fiddling with a little bit more. So I'm just going to take this and bend to a 90 degree, and then I'm going to square up the other side. Now you could have a piece of graph paper or a quilting mat or something to compare the squareness of this on, but I'm going to continue functioning as though I didn't have access to those resources, just because my heart's always with the beginner. It's sometimes all you have is, you know, what's here on the desk and not a whole crafts room worth of stuff. So, and bending. Now you can see here, I bent on the working end as opposed to the end that it was completed, and it put a little bit of a warp right there. So just testing out the rhyme and reason behind why I'm doing things the way that I do them. Though also, sometimes just do it however it feels right and go with that. So now from here, we will test fit our bead. Ooh, I think that looks great. Gives us a lot of space to, hopefully I'll be able to fit the 4mm beads on either side. If not, we'll figure it out. But I think that'll frame that really nicely. And so now from here, I would like to mark at the halfway point. Just like that. And now if I bent this completely on the halfway point to come up into the wires that are for the bail, they would be laying on top of each other. And I actually want our wires to be laying beside each other. So I'm going to bend it just a little off to one side for each of these. That way it gives us the space to make our bail. But I have to be careful because if I do it too offset, then we'll get this problem here where my shoulders were too tight. So, it can be tricky, but you've got this. So we're holding very firmly with our pliers and then getting a nice 90-degree bend. And I kind of feel like if I get my measurement off, I just want to be consistent about it, because then I can be like, it's art, it's supposed to be like that. Because I feel like that one is a little too in the middle. So let's see. I'm going to put that right there and bend up. I'm also doing this tutorial in real time because I am not one of those 5-minute craft channels. This is just how long it actually takes me. So that way you can pause it or you can speed it up or do whatever you need to do to make you happy. But I didn't want to put it into a time lapse or something and then leave something out. So I actually think I might be kind of happy with that. You know, it'll do. Okay. So again, you can make your piece however messy and organic or precise and meticulous as you would like. This is your piece, so if the way that I'm doing it is not your favorite way, then by all means, please, please, please do it your favorite way. Because that's the only correct way to do it, is the way that you want. As long as it's holding together and isn't causing you pain to wear it, then you did it right. Okay. So again, it's a little wonky and weird, but I am going to show you guys, if you do your bend and you're really not happy with it, you can come in here and actually just unbend bend it, or I guess straighten it is the term. And then we can come in and I'm going to put the pliers here. So let's see if we can't. No, I wouldn't do this too much just because the wire can become overworked. I'm just going to come in and give it a bend again. And this way there is a little bit of room to wiggle and correct your imperfections if you're going for it being perfectly. And so again, the bail isn't completely in the middle. But at least it's not quite so, at least now it's a little bit more squared off than what it was. That is going to drive me a little insane though, isn't it? But if I bring them in like that, then it's too narrow. If I say, let's see if we can get a third correction out of it. Oh, I really feel like I'm pushing it at this point. But we'll see. Okay. Yeah, it's still offset. I'm not going to fiddle with it anymore. I did my best. And hopefully that'll be fine. So now I have, oh, how long is this? About 15 inches of 26 gauge wire. And this I had used earlier to make this piece. And I'm going to show you how I suspend, well, how I would have suspended this piece is I would have, if I wanted to do that in the same style, I would have just looped this around over our bail and then started threading my beads on all the way up and then wrapping around here. But I want to show y'all how I did on this piece where we made the bail and then used all of this as just one length of wire, and I very much prefer to do it in that way. That way the only loose ends on this whole piece that are exposed, other than up here with our thick wire, are down here at the bottom, and they have been very nicely tucked so that you don't have to worry about it like snagging your skin or hair or clothing. So to do that, I'm going to pull off a whole arm span, so about 5 feet of this 26 gauge wire. Give it a snip. And so I'm going to come down here and give myself about 12 inches. About 8 or 9 inches. Just to be the tail off to the pendant side of the piece, and I'm right-handed, so I'm weaving to the right. But this is what we'll weave the bail with. And I'm going to begin by doing 2 wraps around one of our bail wires. So there's 1 and 2. And then coming through like a figure 8, I'm going to wrap 1 and 2. Now this should behave to stabilize these wires, and I'm going to then do a little bit of this, I don't know what to call it, weave. But we'll go once and twice around both core wires, and then once around the top one, which is the one away from me, and then coming through so I've hooked twice around both, once around the top, figure eighted to the bottom, if that makes sense. And then I'm coming around again from the top. 1, 2, and then 1 around the top. And it's exiting towards the back, so I'm going to wrap towards the front and through the middle for the second one. Now, this is just the way that I do this. Honestly, it's the result that you get more than the way that you get there. So fiddle around with it and find something that you like. You could just wrap around both of them all the way up, though I have a difficult time personally with keeping consistent tension on the wire. I find adding in a figure eight every so often, which is what we did there, because it looks like doing a figure eight around the two wires. But I find that maintains tension pretty well for me, and I really liked the kind of 2-beat weave of this. So it's 2 around both, and then a figure eight. And I try to be consistent about coming around from the top, because that will make the design look the same from both sides. And 1, 2, and I'm going to keep going through this with you. I'm going to slow down just a little bit, just in case you're having some trouble. So we've done that figure eight, exiting towards the back, and then we're going to wrap once and twice, and then the third time coming around, we just hook the top, and I condense that down on my fingernail, and then I'm coming up from below through the middle. That completes our figure eight. Then I'm coming down from the top. There's 1, 2, and 3. We're going to hook through the middle, and then we're going to hook up from below. And then we come around from the top. There's 1, 2, and 3. That's where I like to lock in my tension, and then wrap there. It can take a while and some practice to get to where your tension is consistent. Then I do like to go through just with my pliers and give it a bit of a smush, because that holds it even more in place. So we're exiting out the back, and I'm going to go once. And you'll see I'm holding my piece, but I'm also pressing quite firmly. But I'm only focusing on like this 4 inches of the wire. All the rest of my wire is just hanging off the table to, I don't know, I guess tantalize the cat, who fortunately is taking a nap. So we can shoot the tutorial unharassed. Hooking through the front, so coming forward and then coming around from the back into the center. Now, if you're getting frustrated or your hands are tensing up or anything like that, just sit the piece down, get some stretches going. I'm actually going to use a piece of scrap wire to determine how long we want our bail to be. So if you want to take knitting needle, paintbrush, mandrel, pliers, whatever you're using, and grab onto the tip of your wire, and then go around. So about right there. So I need my bail to be, oops, that long. And if we were using, let's say, a paintbrush to be our mandrel, I would actually come in and do a couple of wraps to be able to maintain tension. And then I would pull this off and snip. And then one of these loops is how long we would need to make our mandrel be. You could also use just like a piece of string or something. I like to use wire because it holds its shape a little bit better, and so I can drop it and be like, it's still the size it needs to be. So we will continue our weaving until we have the length that we want. So 1, 2, then on the third, smush, and then figure eight it. So the good news about this is you've got a whole inch to practice. You could also just figure eight it all the way up if you wanted to do that. There are infinite variations to what you can do and try for on your bails like this. No. And oftentimes I'll kind of get a little chaotic with it and start weaving in the other direction. And the reason I don't want to do that is because from the opposite side, you can now see there's that inconsistency in the pattern right there. Whereas if we, coming through the back, loop up again, 1, 2, and then on the third, smushing it all down. This way, it doesn't matter which side is the front and which side is the back. They're both the same, which I really like that, especially if you're wanting to add like twists and things and different stuff like that. So just, again, I wanted to share with you guys why I'm doing it the way that I'm doing instead of a different way, because, you know, sometimes that variation may be something that you're looking for. Okay, 1, 2, 1, and 2, 1, 2, 1, and 2. Again, I'm going to try to go. And whenever you're weaving, I do give myself a little bit of space off to the right of what I'm doing because I don't want to risk going back over my work. 1, 2, but also the tighter next to the previous wire that you can go, the more tight and consistent your weaving is going to be. And if you get any like weird bits, you can just smush it. But sometimes smushing doesn't fix everything, unfortunately. But yeah, like right there, I'm a little wonky. So let's see what smushing does for it. Yeah, unless somebody's looking at this under a microscope or something, I think it's fine. And that's the biggest piece of advice I can give anybody is don't let perfectionism get in the way of practice and progress, because sometimes as the artisans, we will see, whether real or imagined, we will see way more flaws than our friends and clients and customers and stuff. So don't be overly hard on yourself in the pursuit of perfection. Just kind of let it be what it is and just do the crafting. Do the thing, as long as it makes you happy. Okay, so I'm going to go 1, 2, and 3. There's 1 and 2. And now we can compare against what length we need. Ooh, we're getting there. Let's do a few more rotations. Now, if you do your weaving like this and it's very wide and then whenever you smush, it's not going to want to stay as tight because there's some extra wire in there from that little bit of space. So don't ever hesitate to just pull your wire back out, straighten it a bit with your fingers, and then go slow and steady. Give yourself lots of patience. Then 1, 2, 1, 2. I'm going to go through, smush all this down. Yeah, I'm pretty happy with that length, though I'm going to do one more, just because. One to grow on. And smush. And I'm going to end on this one because, on the figure 8, because I feel like the wire is locked in between those two core wires, as opposed to it just kind of being wrapped around. So from here, on this veil, what I had done is I curled the ends of my wire in and then bent my bail around and then used that as a spot to attach. I'm going to try something different on this one. And to do that, I'm actually going to wrap 5 times on our core wire. So we had once, there's twice, thrice, 4, and 5. And that's in an effort to just stabilize it. I'm thinking I shouldn't have done that. but we've already done it, so here we are. Because I was going to just snip it and make my bail, which would have been fine, except for I still want to put that wire through the center. And so let's treat it like, let's say your wire broke. Or you pulled a me and snipped it when you didn't mean to. What we would do from here, because plans are nice. It's really great, I think, to go into a project having a plan. But plans are useless. Planning is essential, because now we still know, even though we varied from the plan, we still know the end goal of what we'd like to do, and in which case we would just take some more wire, wrap it around the shoulders, and feed it through our bead. So I am going to go ahead and snip this wire, which was only wrapped twice. So I'm going to go make 3, feed that through 4, feed that through, and 5. And this way, that wire is nice and stabilized. I'm going to take this, I'm going to snip it just as close as I can. I'm going to smush it because I don't want any little pokey bits, if we can help it. And now from here, I'm going to snip both ends of our wire so that they're both nice and flat. And I'm going to decide which way. I'm going to have it folding around that way. And so I'm going to grab with my mandrel pliers. And if I can help it, I really like to hold on to the bare wire because that keeps me from distorting any of my weaving. But that also makes our bend be a little too soon. So I'm going to open that back up, grab it right here, and just start kind of feeding around. I think I actually made this longer than what I needed it to be. So I'm going to grab on a bigger part of my mandrel pliers and encourage that around. And then once we have it, I'll then fold through there. So while this isn't perfectly circular in shape, I think that'll be just fine. I kind of prefer an oval shape for my bails anyhow. So now from here, we can take our flat nose pliers. I want to smush this just a little harder. There we go. And I want to give these wires a bend because as we do this next step, having this first bend there will kind of train the wire to bend further there. Whereas if we didn't do that, it would kind of just do whatever it wants. This trains it into, or encourages it rather, to hopefully bend there. Sometimes wire is just finicky. I'm sure any of y'all working with wire right now has noticed that sometimes it gets a little bit of a mind of its own, but sometimes we can try to anticipate it. So now I'm just taking my round nose pliers and bending that around. And I'm going to take on this side. And especially with thicker wires like this, I especially find that first initial bend to be very helpful. Now we've gone a little wonky here, so I'm just going to, or try to, there we go. Try to get everything right back onto this correct plane. And I'm now going to take my bent nose pliers, whoops, and bend that around just a little bit more, like that. Oh, sorry, I hope I didn't go out of frame. And I'm going to take this one and encourage it around as well. And now I'm going to snip. Whoop, there went that. Yeah, I felt so bad the other day I did this and the wire pinged and stabbed my plant. Like my poor plant. But she's all right. Okay. So there is our bail, and we will feel for any pokey bits, and if there are any, if you were using bare copper, you could very easily file this down to make sure that there's no pokey bits poking out. Okay, and I'm getting a little bit of a pokey bit from the end of our thinner gauge wire right here. So I'm actually going to take that, separate it from the wire, tighten it down by tugging on it, and then I'm going to snip it off just as close as I can. Because sometimes things get distorted whenever you're, bending the wire around. So always check your work. Again, I'm sorry, I don't mean to be wandering out of frame, hopefully. And it's so off center, but that's fine. That's fine. That's fine. So now from here, we can suspend our stone. So I'm going to take, it does not take much. This is 9 inches of wire. Now you could use a 24 gauge. You could even use a 20 gauge, though I would personally find that pretty challenging. But I'm just going to come around through the back side of the bail, hook around and pull straight down. Actually, before I do that, I'm going to thread a bead on. Oh, that's too small of a bead. I'm going to use a 4mm bead because I like that size. But truthfully, it'd be best to just use whatever size bead fits there and fills up that space most effectively. This is also a great opportunity that if you're making a necklace for this pendant to hang on, using a bead that matches the rest of the necklace would be a great way of tying in your focal point. Or using these beads and metal tones for earrings and bracelets and things like that to make it kind of match. It's the little details like that that can really make a set look like they belong together. Okay, well that bead's giant. It's not going to work. So let's go through then. And here I have some wee bitty guys, some little 2mm beads. Don't run away on me. And let's see if we can fit 2 wires through. Are we lucky? Maybe? Yes. Okay, cool. Oh my gosh, I did not expect that to work. Oh, okay. If that didn't work, what I would have done is I probably would have just gone to a 28 gauge instead of a 26 gauge. And it can be really helpful to have different gauges of wire on hand. And this may be another instance where maybe you wanted to use a 24 gauge for the bail and then, something thinner for the bead in the focal point, or vice versa. Okay, so now could I fit a 4mm bead? I don't think so. So we'll do another 2mm, which also maybe some size 11 seed beads or maybe slightly bigger could work for this. Okay, so we've slid that on there. Oh, I hadn't considered that. Okay, well the beads fit right up inside the hole of the other bead really well, so I actually think that looks pretty cool. And so now from here, I'm going to split the thin weaving wire, and I'm going to wrap at least 10 times. If you wanted, though, you could weave around the entire bezel. You could add a bead fringe around the edges. It could be at this point that you start making a woven frame. Sky's the limit, y'all. So whenever my weaving wire gets below 6 inches, probably, I'll start using my pliers just because it's easier for me to grip onto. Especially, I was going to be like, feel my fingers, they're super cold, but they are. My fingers are super cold because I have the heater turned off so I can record without it yelling at me. But whenever we whenever I go through and do that first wrap, I want to make sure that the tension through our bead is nice and snug. So I've wrapped it around, and then I'm just cinching just a bit. You don't want to do that too much because it can break your wire, but I just want it to where there's not too much wiggle. So there's 1, 2, 3. Oh, also, if you wanted to hammer your frame with like a ball peen hammer or a chasing hammer or anything like that, it would have been a good idea to do that way before this point. But it's never too late. You can turn your bead sideways and just very carefully, like if we pretend like this is my anvil, we could very carefully place that here and then hammer carefully, but I would really hate to have done all this work and then risk injuring the stone. Though I will say it is very convenient to be able to just turn the bead out of the way to get your wire through. And then we can smush. Now also, right now, you may be experiencing that this slides from side to side. I'm going to try to do 15 wraps on each side, but what we can do is after we've done all of our wrapping, we can go through and squeeze these coils with our pliers, and you don't want to squeeze so hard that it cuts through all of our coiling, but you can squeeze just hard enough that it'll keep things from shifting around. So it's just something to be mindful of, that whenever you are making something with the intention of moving parts usually leaves more room and risk for breakage. So now with Randy and I and our company, we do free repairs on all of our work because we try our best to make sure that stuff won't break, but we understand life happens, so we give that guarantee with all of our work. But again, it is very nice to be able to design something with the intent of not breaking, which putting the beads in on either end keeps the spinning stone from rubbing directly onto the wire, in theory. Seems to have been working out so far. So I'm just going to keep weaving through like this. Probably could have done with giving myself just a little bit more wire to work with right from the beginning, but I do love to be able to use any bit of scrap that I can. So there's that. Now also, whenever you're doing your coils, if you start getting a lot of space in there between the individual coils, whenever you smush it down, you'll have a bumpier looking coil, which can be tightened down on, but again, just things to kind of watch out for. I have completely lost track of lost count. I'm just wrapping and hanging out now. So whenever we get down to that last bit, we can just take our pliers and kind of cinch it around. And that way, there's no wasted wire. And that is my favorite. Okay, so now we shall do that on the other side. Now, like most things, if you wear it backwards, it's reversible, but this one is intended that way, so that's good. So I'm just coming through now, and smush, and if you plan to take your wire all the way to its end, you can avoid having to count coils by just making sure that both of your lengths of wire are snipped to the same length right from the get-go. So I'm going to smush that together. Try to make sure this is spaced nicely. And now I'm going to come in and just smush and smush. And it still slides. Crap. Well, let's smush it some more. There we go. That's much better. Now you still can, I think. No, okay. Hammering and giving a little bit of texture to your frame first would really make that. Sorry, I got distracted. Hammering your frame first would give you a little bit of texture for your coils to hold on to. And I find that can be really helpful, but I really wanted to keep just that round look of the wire. Boing. Oh, that makes me so happy, you guys. Boing. Nice. Okay, so there we go. We made a pendant, y'all. Now, also something that looks super cool, I have seen some other artisans do like little oil paintings that they then seal, or acrylic paintings that they seal onto the stones. So this would be a great way to kind of feature that, I think. Though I'd want to really make sure that I was using a sealer that I had confidence in. Also, this is a fantastic way, I think, of displaying lampwork beads that have a design on either side, or even your own handmade polymer clay beads. Like if you do a bit of cane work on both sides, or sculpting, just whatever you do, I think that's pretty darn cool. Hey guys, thanks so much for hanging out with me during this tutorial. I do hope that it was helpful to you. If you have any questions, comments, or ideas, please leave them down below. I love hearing from y'all. If you enjoy our channel and would like to support the creation of more tutorials, as well as look at the doggy and the cat, as well as participate in our exclusive streams and our craft-along kits and all sorts of stuff, please consider joining our craft-along club and our social media and all this stuff. All that's down below. So again, if you have any questions, just holler at us. Hey big boy, oh you're such a good dog. And I will see y'all in our next video. So until then guys, happy crafting. Bye.